In the vast continent of Isoan, the Holy Alliance Empire maintained a divine order under the faith of the moon goddess Elucia. Within this new era, celestial arts and magic thrived, but all unorthodox forces were strictly regulated and sealed away, lest they corrupt the hearts of humankind. Yet, in the forgotten corners of the empire, whispers of ancient secrets and awakening bloodlines persisted. Deep within a forest, a monstrous boar's roar echoes. Watching from the shadows is Richard, a young boy who smirks as he confirms his prey has finally taken the bait. He moves in for the kill, celebrating his catch, but his victory is cut short when an arrow suddenly strikes the boar. Another group of boys, led by one named Pyru, emerges from the trees, declaring the prey theirs and accusing Richard of being a thief. Pyru's gang mocks Richard, pointing out that his traps were small ones meant only for rabbits, far too weak to catch a massive boar. Richard shoots back, questioning why they were following him in the first place if they thought he was just hunting rabbit. A companion of Pyru's tells him to stop wasting his breath, declaring that Pyru's arrow killed the boar, and that's all that matters. They tell Richard he is the one going too far. Richard stands his ground, insisting he caught the beast with his trap. Enraged, the bully calls him a fatherless bastard, shoves him to the ground, and sneers that being able to read a few books doesn't make him special. He proclaims that power is always right and dares Richard to disagree. Pinned but defiant, Richard glares up, reiterating that the prey is his. The bully, furious at Richard's unyielding gaze, viciously kicks him and repeats the insult. He demands Richard submit, but the boy, bloodied and beaten, only repeats that the prey is his. The bully snaps, ordering his friends to beat Richard to death, promising to take full responsibility. Later that night, an injured Richard is back home. His mother gently tends to his wounds, asking what happened. He claims he was simply hurt while hunting the boar she had requested for his birthday feast. She tells him not to push himself so hard and uses a glowing green divine art to mend his injuries, chiding him to be more careful. Richard, his wounds magically healed, insists he's not a child anymore. He's 10 now and can handle himself. His mother smiles, reflecting on his tough-acting nature and how quickly he's grown. She decides the time has come to reveal a long-held secret, a special ritual. She asks if he's always wanted to wield divine arts like her. Stunned, Richard asks if she is truly serious. She confirms it, calling it her 10th birthday gift to him. Overjoyed, Richard exclaims it's awesome, thinking he'll finally be able to stop getting bullied. His mother tempers his excitement, explaining that learning divine arts is a complex matter. The Church strictly controls this power to prevent taboo forces like shadow and demons from harming the world. She reveals her reasons for never teaching him were to protect him, and because there is a crucial prerequisite. One must learn the ancient language and be formally acknowledged by the goddess Elucia herself. She shows him a line of ancient text, a magical barrier against evil, and tells him its meaning. Power is bestowed upon the truly strong. She promises to begin teaching him everything, starting today. To her utter astonishment, Richard reads the next line of script aloud, stating that a truly strong person must also possess wisdom. Shocked, she asks who taught him the ancient language. He simply replies that he read it in a book. He leads her to the attic and points to an old tome, explaining that after reading every other book in the house, he had only recently begun to comprehend this one. His mother is left breathless. She reveals the book is the holy scripture of the moon goddess Elucia, containing the 7 divine art. The very language he spoke originated from it. She tells him that not just anyone can understand its words, only those chosen by the goddess are qualified. She looks at her son in amazement, realizing he has already been chosen by Elucia. His mother asks if he is ready for the final step. He affirms that he is, and she instructs him to kneel. As his 10th birthday gift, she will now bestow upon him the enlightenment of the divine arts. He will enter the halls of the goddess and receive an epiphany about his true destiny. She warns him that he will likely face 2 or 3 choices and must listen to the goddess's voice and follow his heart. Richard is instantly transported to a celestial, star-filled dimension. He wonders where he is when a mysterious voice asks if he desires more power. When Richard asks who is speaking, the voice cryptically replies that it is the other half hidden deep within his heart. All at once, 6 magnificent statues awaken around him, and the voice commands him to begin his selection. Richard understands this is the choice his mother spoke of and sees the divine arts before him: enlightenment, healing, sanction, silver moon armament, judgment, and foresight. He questions why there are 6 options when his mother had said there would only be a few. The voice ignores him, booming for him to choose. Conflicted and uncertain, Richard thinks of his desire to become stronger, to protect his mother, and to become a true man. He recalls the words from the scripture, that a real man must also have wisdom. His mother's final advice echoes in his mind: follow his heart. In that moment, he understands. He declares that he wants wisdom, the wisdom to become a real man. A divine voice confirms his choice. The will of the goddess points not to any of the 6 statues, but to a secret 7th statue hidden at their intersection. It is the divine art known as the dark side of the moon. They always said nothing came for free, and if someone gained power out of nowhere, the cost would hit hard sooner or later. Richard barely made it back to his room before he collapsed. His mother called out his name, her voice sharp with concern. He didn't answer, pain tearing through him as if something inside was trying to claw its way out. Then it did. A dark, shifting shadow began spilling from his body, stretching and twisting into something unnatural. His mother froze at the doorway, horror washing over her as she cried out at the sight of the shadow creature forming right in front of her. As the ritual tied to the 7th statue ended, Richard's mother, Elaine, screamed his name as his body slammed against the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Before she could reach him, something dark and hostile tore its way out of his body, its shadowy claws dragging free like it had been waiting for this moment. The sight crushed her. She collapsed, horrified that Alucia's sacred enlightenment, something meant to bless, had warped into something so vile. Her thoughts spiraled backward, replaying how effortlessly Richard had understood the ancient language. The realization hit her hard and cold, that knowledge may never have come from the moon goddess at all. Panic took over. Without hesitation, she activated a divine art, foresight. The vision struck instantly, revealing the truth she had feared most. The dark entity wasn't just near her son, it was bound directly to his soul. When the vision shattered, pain exploded through her head, but clarity followed. She knew now that the moon goddess's domain had been breached, polluted by chaotic forces. Ancient lore flooded her mind. She remembered the shadow races, creatures that drifted between planes, feeding on corruption and searching endlessly for new worlds to infect. Long ago, fragments of them had reached Isoan, draining mana from living beings and twisting divine believers into unwilling vessels. That corruption had once ignited a war so devastating it erased an entire civilization, a war only ended when the Holy Alliance and the moon goddess herself intervened. Elaine had never believed Alucia's power could be tainted like this. Now she understood the truth. Richard had become a beacon, a living anchor for the Shadow's next invasion. His future narrowed to 2 horrifying outcomes. Either his body would be torn apart by clashing divine and demonic energies, or he would be permanently claimed by one of the most powerful shadow entities. A bitter thought crept in, and she wondered if this was punishment for her own past sins. She blamed herself immediately. If she had still held her title as Alucia's high priestess, she was certain the ritual would never have twisted this way. Refusing to accept losing her son, she forced herself to act. She tore through their home until she found an old scroll, faintly glowing with dormant power. The figure tied to it was legendary, someone who had once wiped out the entire elven royal court. If anyone could deal with shadow life forms, it would be him. With shaking hands, she poured her mana into the scroll. A name ignited in burning light, ensuring the message would reach its owner, Gotan Isaiah Setanastolia Amand. Her mind slipped into the past. 11 years earlier, Gotan had dragged her into a cave, urging her to hurry. He told her it was the only safe place left and that he would hold off their pursuers. He begged her to live. She had refused to leave him, but he had pulled her into an embrace, saying there was no time. He pleaded with her to protect their child. That was when he revealed the truth, that their son belonged to the future Akamon family and carried a demonic bloodline. He asked her to give the boy that surname and, one day, to tell him his full name, Gotan Igia Setanastolia Akamond. His final wish had been simple, to raise their son into a true man. Back in the present, Elaine spoke through the scroll's connection, addressing Gotan. She told him she had lived in seclusion with their child for 10 years and never imagined this would be how father and son would reunite. She begged him to help, insisting the boy needed him now more than ever. Calling upon the Grandmaster, she unleashed a powerful spell, demanding the darkness be driven away. Eventually, Richard stirred awake, his head pounding and his memories blurred. He vaguely remembered the full moon before everything went black. When his vision cleared and he looked at his mother, he froze. Her human appearance was gone, replaced by delicate features and long, pointed elven ears. She calmly told him not to panic. This was simply her true form. Fragments of the ritual returned to him. Choosing wisdom, the seventh statue appearing, and a single sentence spoken in an oppressive, silent void, just as the moon has both a light and a dark side. He explained that beyond wisdom, he had gained something else, an ability called truth. Elaine was stunned. She had never heard of such a thing. Even though his memories were hazy, Richard felt different, stronger. His senses were sharper, his vision and hearing unnaturally clear. As she watched him adjust, her own words about his demonic bloodline echoed uncomfortably in her mind. She told him she was relieved he was safe, but now that he was 10, he deserved to know something important. Richard tried to joke, asking if this was another birthday surprise. She didn't smile. She told him it was about his father. When she asked whether he wanted to meet him, Richard was completely caught off guard. He stammered, admitting he had always believed his father was dead. Elaine apologized for hiding the truth for so long, explaining that circumstances had torn them apart. She assured him his father was alive, and if Richard wanted to meet him, it would happen soon. The people his father had sent would be arriving shortly. Richard noticed the longing in her eyes and quietly asked if she wanted to see him. When she nodded through tears, he made up his mind instantly. If she wanted to see his father, then so did he. Elaine pulled him into a tight embrace, thanking him, while silently realizing that the time she had left to protect him was slipping away faster than ever. Several days later, the quiet village stirred as a formation of heavily armored cavalry rode in, their presence impossible to ignore. One grim-faced knight dismounted and approached a local villager, delivering a single demand without hesitation. He wanted to know where Elaine lived. At their head rode a scarred captain named Mordred, his sharp gaze sweeping over the terrified villagers. He demanded to know the whereabouts of a woman named Elaine. The villagers shook their heads in unison, insisting that no one by that name lived among them. Mordred was not convinced. His voice turned cold as he declared that his orders were absolute. If the villagers refused to cooperate, his men would tear the village apart stone by stone until they found her. Just as the knights prepared to begin their search, a lone white-haired woman stepped out from her home. Her expression was calm, almost detached, as she announced herself. The villagers recognized her as Elaine, but before anyone could react, the knights stiffened. One soldier barked an order for her to freeze, only to be immediately reprimanded for his disrespect. Mordred dismounted at once. To everyone's shock, he knelt before the woman and addressed her with reverence, calling her my lady. He introduced himself as a knight serving Lord Gotan, sent under direct command to escort her back. The villagers were thrown into complete confusion. They whispered among themselves, struggling to understand what was happening. As they stared, Elaine's appearance subtly shifted, revealing her true identity. She was an elf. Standing beside her was a young boy, Richard. Elaine turned to Richard, calmly explaining that the knights were not here for a friendly visit. She then introduced Sir Mordred by name. What followed left everyone speechless. Mordred turned and bowed deeply, not to Elaine but to Richard. The villagers could not comprehend why armored knights were bowing to a village boy, nor why the woman they had known for years was an elf. Mordred asked his lady whether she had finished packing, explaining that Lord Gotan was eager for their return. She answered that she was ready. Richard called out to his mother in panic, but she reassured him gently, telling him the knights would not hurt him. She reminded him of their promise, that they would finally go and meet his father. As preparations to leave began, the knights sealed off the village, blocking all exits. Mordred watched Richard closely, his thoughts clear. This boy was Richard, the true heir of the Akamond bloodline, and the son of Lord Gotan. Suddenly, everything unraveled. A soldier rushed to Mordred, shouting that the lady had disappeared. She had returned to her house for a forgotten item when a strange gust of wind swept through, and she vanished from sight. Moments later, another cry rang out. The village was on fire. It was Elaine's home. A messenger from the rear delivered the final blow. The lady had returned home only to burn herself alive. Richard let out a gut-wrenching scream, calling for his mother as he tried to charge toward the flames. The knights restrained him as he struggled wildly, shouting that this was not how things were supposed to be. Mordred grabbed the hysterical boy and forced him to calm down, telling him this was his mother's own decision. Mordred spoke solemnly, calling her a pure and courageous woman. He said she was worthy of Lord Gotan, willing to burn away her own life to protect what she cherished most. He urged Richard not to betray the hopes his parents had placed in him. The story slipped into a memory. Elaine had once told Richard that they would soon have to leave the village where he was born. He asked why she waited until after his 10th birthday to tell him his father was still alive. She explained that something terrible had happened because of her own carelessness, and only his father could fix it. Powerful factions had forced her to hide him away. She told him that a recent ritual had forced her back into her true elven form. Her so-called sickness was worsening, her magic fading. A sacrifice was necessary. She said she would have to leave him behind for treatment while he stayed with his father. When Richard protested, she gently insisted it was all for his sake. No matter where he went, she promised, she would always be by his side. Back in the present, Richard lost consciousness. He was carried into a carriage as Mordred issued his final orders. A few women would be spared to spread the story of the lady's death. As for the rest of the village, Lord Gotan wanted no witnesses to his son's location. At Mordred's command, the knights sealed the village, burned it to the ground, and slaughtered every remaining inhabitant. Another memory surfaced. Richard had once asked what kind of person his father was. Elaine had called him a madman, but also a once-in-a-generation genius in politics, warfare, and martial art. 10 years earlier, he had conquered the elven royal court of the Evernight Forest by himself, shaking the entire Holy Alliance. She had not heard from him in years, but believed he now held the title of Marquis and resided in Black Rose Castle. Richard finally awoke, sobbing as he called for his mother. He found himself in a luxurious, unfamiliar room. His last memory was being held down by the night. Panic surged through him as he jumped out of bed, determined to find her. A knock interrupted him. A woman entered and calmly informed him that fresh clothes had been prepared. He was to bathe first, then change. She pointed him toward the bathing room and told him to clean himself properly. The Lord wished to see him. The title made Richard freeze. After dressing in the fine clothes, he walked through a grand, imposing castle. The air felt heavy and unfamiliar. He looked up and saw a man standing on a balcony above, black and white hair framing his sharp features, a red rose pinned to his chest. The man's voice echoed through the hall as he spoke Richard's full name, Richard Acamond. He declared that the boy carried his blood and belonged to his lineage. Later, in the vast dining hall of Black Rose Castle, Richard sat at the far end of a long table, quietly watching the man he now knew was his father. Gotan calmly sliced his food and casually remarked that no matter how chaotic the world became, it should never ruin one's appetite for a good meal. It was a sentiment Richard remembered well. His mother Elaine used to say the same thing. Gotan noted that Richard's personality closely resembled his mother's, though the events surrounding him had gone far beyond what Gotan had expected. He acknowledged that Elaine had made a tremendous sacrifice, protecting Richard while keeping Gotan's identity hidden from powerful forces that would have hunted them down. Still grieving and burning with anger, Richard shot back that his name was simply Richard. He rejected the Acamond surname outright. Gotan did not seem offended in the slightest. He calmly pointed out that Elaine had never given Richard the Moonsong surname, which meant that by default, he belonged to the Acamond family. In the end, she had entrusted Richard to him. Regardless of what his mother may have said, Richard carried the blood of Acamond nobility. Their family was once meant to hold the rank of Grand Duke, but the madness of their ancestors had earned them the hatred of established noble families. To those nobles, the Acamond were nothing more than unruly, low-class troublemakers who lacked etiquette and respect for order. To make his point, Gotan spoke of a legendary figure known as Philip the Bloodthirsty, a man infamous for carving flesh from living victims and eating it raw. With a faint, chilling smile, Gotan revealed that this monster was none other than the greatest emperor of the Holy Alliance Empire. Despite his cruelty, the ancient noble families worshipped him. In a world where such a monster was praised as the pinnacle of nobility, the Acamond family had instead been labeled as mad and dangerous outsiders. Gotan told Richard plainly that as an Acamond, he had no choice but to grow powerful. Richard clenched his fists and concluded that such a corrupt system had to be resisted. Gotan corrected him without hesitation. This was not about resistance. He simply refused to be ruled by trash. He warned Richard that his understanding of the world was still far too simple. One day, when he learned the full truth, he might discover that the person he cherished most was no different from the bloodthirsty emperor himself. Their tense meal was interrupted when a cloaked aide entered and reported that spies from other noble families had been captured, along with over 100 commoners involved in the operation. Gotan issued his order without emotion. Dispose of all of them. No exceptions. Leave no survivors. He then turned to the young woman who had attended to Richard earlier and revealed that she was Richard's older half-sister. He placed Richard's safety in her hands from that moment on. Richard froze in shock, only now realizing that he had a sister. Fury surged through him as he demanded to know what his mother truly meant to Gotan. Gotan looked away and said that Elaine meant nothing anymore. Her final act had been handing Richard over to him, a wish he had no intention of honoring. He warned Richard that fulfilling his mother's hopes would be difficult. Gotan would not give him power or guidance. Richard was trapped within this castle, and would have to rely on himself alone to seize whatever chances were offered. A memory surfaced in Richard's mind. He remembered asking his mother if she still loved his father. She had smiled and said that she did, and that she hoped Richard might someday like him as well. Now, staring at the cold, distant man before him, Richard's heart filled with rage. He declared that he hated him. 2 days later, Mordred escorted Richard to the dazzling magic tower city of Deep Blue. Mordred explained that this was the training ground Gotan had arranged for him and that his new mentor awaited inside. Richard was overwhelmed by the sight. The legendary city shimmered with glowing crystals and teemed with powerful magic users, just as he had read about in his mother's books. Mordred approached the large transmission crystal, and informed the man within that Lord Gotan had requested he teach the young master, citing the old ties between them. The man's voice scoffed from the crystal, complaining that the Marquis still owed him for materials. Mordred shot back that the principal had already been paid, and that they had no intention of acknowledging such outrageous interest. The voice waved it off, openly admitting that Richard possessed exceptional magical talent, but making it clear he would not work for free. He boasted of having rejected countless so-called God-favored geniuses. Before agreeing to take Richard as a student, the man made a single demand. He would first inspect the goods. In the world of magic, power was never a basic right. It was a privilege, granted only to those born with rare bloodlines or special constitutions. To find these chosen few, the city of Deep Blue held the Spring of Assessment, a sacred place where potential mages were tested and ranked. One failed candidate after another was thrown out of the magical spring, each receiving the same dull result: white, the lowest grade. The crowd watching quickly lost interest. Mordred leaned toward Richard and told him it would soon be his turn. He reminded him to connect with the magic pool and endure no matter what happened. When Richard stepped forward as the 77th tester, dressed in plain clothes, whispers spread through the crowd. Some laughed, calling him a brat, while others wondered if he had wandered into the wrong place. An official instructed Richard to enter the spring and accept the trial. The instant his hand touched the water, searing pain tore through his body. A massive surge of magical energy flooded his veins, making it feel as though his bones were being crushed and rebuilt at the same time. From the sidelines, Mordred and the knights shouted for him to hold on. They knew failure was not an option. In the middle of his agony, Richard remembered his father's words about fighting for every opportunity. Gritting his teeth, he swore he would not let Gotan look down on him. Minute after minute passed. 10 minutes went by, then more. The spectators stared in disbelief. No one his age had ever lasted that long. Suddenly, the grating orb blazed with brilliant light. The result rang out across the area: gold, advanced level. Cheers were about to erupt when towering pillars of golden energy burst upward around Richard. Then something went terribly wrong. Thick, foul black energy exploded from within him, twisting around the golden light like a living thing. Alarms screamed throughout the facility as warnings of an unknown and dangerous anomaly echoed through the air. Sue Helen and the surrounding mages froze in shock. She immediately recognized the black energy for what it was: a shadow creature. The sight sent Mordred's mind racing back to his final moments with Elaine. She had confessed her fear that this exact situation might occur. That was why she had been forced to contact Gotan. Using her command magic would expose them to the fury of the noble factions, but she had no other choice. Before parting, she made Mordred swear to protect Richard at all costs. He had pledged his life without hesitation. Back in the present, Mordred threw himself forward, placing his body between Richard and the corrupting shadow energy. The force slammed into him like a tidal wave. No matter how hard he tried, his human body could not break through the chaotic power. As tower officials shouted for emergency support, a powerful presence descended from above. Sue Helen was already moving. She cut through the air like a streak of light, ordering everyone to stand back. With a single, overwhelming blast of magic, she erased the shadows completely. She looked down at the unconscious boy and felt a rare flicker of emotion. This was the chosen child, the one targeted by shadow creatures, the precious bloodline Gotan had entrusted to her. Mordred cried out for his young master. Hearing the name, Sue Helen smiled faintly. She declared that Richard had passed the inspection and was qualified to become her student. Trapped in a burning nightmare, Richard saw his mother reaching out to him, calling his name again and again. He jolted awake with a scream, gasping for breath in an unfamiliar bed. A kindly old man sat nearby and gently told him not to be afraid. He introduced himself as Richard's new primary magic instructor, assigned by Sue Helen to take care of him. He explained that there had been an accident during the assessment a few hours earlier. Richard tried to remember what happened, but everything after touching the spring was a blank. The old man advised him not to push himself, reassuring him that he was safe now and that everything would be explained in time.